Cara Santa Maria and Seth Andrews.
Oh, hi there.
Howdy. I don't know why they put a table between us. I feel like, oh, it's just like a talk show. I get to be like Stephen Colbert. So tell us about your latest project, Cara. That sort of thing.
All the canned banter.
Who are you again?
Blessed be the fruit.
Yes.
Any of you guys watch that show?
What's
The Handmaid's Tale? Oh my God, I cannot. My flight gets in tomorrow. I kissed my wife, I scratched the dogs, and we're going to have to watch The Handmaid's Tale. It is outside of Breaking Bad. I'm obsessed with The Handmaid's Tale. So that's how I greet you. Blessed be the fruit. And you say? It just got creepy, dude. It just got creepy.
So I'm actually going to do, well, no, I'll save that. I want to save that.
God.
The audio thing that we talked about earlier, because Seth recorded an introduction for me for the show, which I love, and I'll play for you later just because I'm amused by it. How you guys doing?
Cool.
Anything on your mind? We're just going
to do that tonight, right? We're just going to
why
hang.
not?
I just spent 5 hours in how many lanes of traffic going 2 miles an hour?
I told you.
And the motorcycles are going, "Phew, phew." Is that still legal?
Yeah.
Does it freak anybody out besides me?
I try that shit in Texas. Yeah. You could run right into a car door.
No,
In
it'd be
Texas,
like-
you have to ride in formation.
Yeah.
Right? The motorcycle law is that it's like 2, and then 3 makes like a tricycle shape, and then 4. There's like a special formation you have to ride in. In LA, you can go in between lanes legally,
That's nuts.
right?
In Austin, they just like 200 points, boom, they'd open the car door. Right?
So, for me, the Magic of Skepticism tour has been about trying to teach the basics of skepticism. And it's interesting because a lot of the people who show up at the shows know me from the atheist experience. And I've done that for 14 years, and don't worry, I'm not going to quit. But there are some really good people doing it when I'm away. And as I run around, I get to meet people, I get to interact with some of the local groups. And the goal for me has been trying to promote skepticism, to discourage the anti-science stuff. And the most common question that I get at the beginning of Q&A is, why in the world are we now dealing with flat earthers?
Yeah.
Why are we dealing with flat earthers, either of you?
I still hear the question, are they legit? Like, do they really think the earth is flat? Did you guys see the meme that said, if the earth was really flat, cats would have pushed everything off the edge by now? Do you think they really believe it?
A lot of them do. I don't think it's fair to say that all of them do. I'm not even sure if the original architects believe it.
Yeah.
But it isn't that often the case, right? But a lot of the people who are in the movement, is it a movement?
I don't know. They had
is it a
conference.
church?
The Church of the
Ooh.
Flat Earth.
Like what? Because it's not really religiously motivated, is it?
Well, I've had 2 different motivations for this presented to me. One of the motivations was that, in fact, if the world is flat, then that flies in the face of everything we know about physics, so it must have been created by a god.
Yeah.
The other one, which I get more often, seems to be more conspiracy theorist minded,
Yeah.
that the government is lying to you about everything, and so they're also lying about the moon landing and the shape of the earth, et cetera.
And NASA is protecting the Great Ice Wall, right? That's the
Yes.
narrative.
I love the fact that we live in a time where winter is coming can also address the flat earthers with the ice wall at the edge.
Is there kind of a hipster mentality too? Hey, we don't trust those scientists. And, it's like there's a group of engineers, very smart people, who have organized, I remember we did a conference back when I was a video producer, and we were doing some kind of a conference somewhere, and these engineers had organized to protest the conspiracy to say that the government was behind 9/11. And part of me thought, who knows whether or not they genuinely, I think they genuinely believe it, but there was almost like like a Robin Hood mentality to it. And I don't know if that plays into the flat earth or not,
Yeah, I think that a lot of conspiracy thinking does come from a place of feeling minimized and a place of distrust of the powers that be, whether it be governmental power or sometimes people lump in scientific power, like just consensus in general. So it's kind of, we are the the oppressed. And so we are going to carry on this narrative because it flies in the face of the oppressor. I do think there's some religious implication of like the four corners of the earth, and there's like very cherry-picked Bible verses that some people use to promote the flat earth narrative. But I don't know if you guys read, but Michael Marshall, who's a very prominent skeptic, people call him Marsh in the UK, one of the architects of the QED conference in the UK, he recently went to the Flat Earth Convention and wrote a lot about the psychology behind the individuals who were there. He really kind of, in a very respectful way, spoke with them and asked them honest questions to try and understand why it is that they were there and what it is that they thought. It was a really interesting read. I recommend it.
So you think that a good chunk of it perhaps comes from a power imbalance? Because if you're not wealthy, the wealthy have power. And if you're not particularly knowledgeable in science, the scientists have power.
Absolutely.
And if the government's not going the way you want and everything else, then the government is now an other. And this is something that I constantly find myself fighting with people about, is this notion of the government as an other. When we live in a participatory government, you get to vote, you get to run for office. And people will tell me, I don't vote, because my vote would be wasted. And I keep...
Why isn't voting mandatory in the U.S.? They do it in Australia, they do it in a lot of places. I personally, or at least how about why Tuesday, right? Like, why do you have to vote on a Tuesday? That doesn't make any sense.
Oh, okay.
Like, why? Like, people
what's
who are not...
What's special about Tuesday that we shouldn't vote on Tuesdays?
What's special about Tuesday is that people who are not privileged can't get out of work to go vote. And although it is illegal to bar somebody from voting, lots of people don't get the opportunity because they are doing day laboring, they are working in different positions where it's difficult for them to get out. I just don't think we make it as easy to vote in this country as we'd like to think we do.
Oh, I definitely wish it was a lot easier. Although I've had my bank card stolen and turned off twice in the last 6 months, cloned, et cetera, and I'm sitting here on the phone with them. It happened as soon as I got to Vancouver, so I had to do the whole Canada tour without a card. And I called them, and I'm like, so I have a card that has a chip in it and a PIN number, and it's in my possession, and an app on my phone that tells me anytime it's used. And you can locate me with my phone through GPS to know whether or not I'm standing here with my card. And yet you still can't figure out that it wasn't me at the grocery store in Timbuktu.
Well, but they were concerned that it might not be you. That's why you got the fraud alert.
Exactly, but why didn't they just stop the damn charge then?
Because it might be, it happens to me all the time. I travel a lot for my job, and yeah, it's kind of weird that I'm using my ATM card at this little shop in Morocco. So they just want to make sure. I think that's nice.
I had to call him. I called him and I said, I'm going to be traveling. You turn my card off, and I'm taking every penny I have, all 14 of them, and moving them to a new bank.
Cara's a bank card apologist. I'm like, really?
I appreciate the fraud alerts, don't you guys?
No, I
think they're helpful.
Oh no, I like the fraud alerts. I just wish that if they recognized there was something weird going on, that person didn't get to buy what they wanted to buy. But what happened is they got the product that they bought, and then my card gets turned off for 20 days as I travel across Canada.
Yeah, it's not a perfect system.
It's just,
I'll give you that.
It's more Matt whining.
First world problems.
Yeah.
Not exactly sure what that has to do with voting.
Yeah. Absolutely nothing. No, it does have something to do with voting in the sense that we're talking about trying to make it easier.
Yeah.
Do you want everybody?
I do.
Yeah.
Flat earthers?
Yes.
Yeah.
I understand. But do you want everybody?
Here's the thing. I want everybody to ensure that their choices and their voices are represented by our democratic process. But I also want to ensure that everybody within this great nation has the opportunity to be educated so that their voices can represent their real interests.
I'm on your page. And I think creating a system that's not prohibitive at the front end is huge. It also places an onus upon the people knowing that they have a mandatory, they are responsible by law to vote. Then the onus is upon them to educate themselves about the vote. But we've all seen the people who've gone into the ballot box and been like, oh, I like the sound of their name, and they just sort of go down, or maybe it's a straight party thing. Do you think education would be part of that, or does that have to be a 1-2 punch? We make it available, but we also say we create a mechanism that more easily educates the voter. I don't know.
I think that's part of it, but I also think campaign finance reform really, I mean, I know it sounds like it's the panacea, but I think it would solve a lot of problems in this country. It's funny, we're getting so political. I'm very excited by this.
Yeah.
I think that if we had a window in which candidates could campaign, and if we actually enforced limits on the funding that they're able to use during that campaign window, we would see a much more even playing field, and you wouldn't so much see people voting for people just because of their name recognition. We would actually maybe hear about the issues because they would be going to debates just like everyone else.
I'll tell you why I'm not afraid of everybody voting. I mean, you know, in an ideal world, yes, only the people who agree with me would be my preferred voters. But I don't live in the Matt rules everything world, and you guys would be better off if we did. But I promise, I can wield power with responsibility. But I'm not afraid of it because I have enough confidence in the foundations of a system, even though we see checks and balances are not necessarily being used in the way that I'd prefer they would. When we talk about democracy or a representative republic that's based on democracy, there's that old story that, you know, two wolves and a sheep are arguing about what's for dinner. And democracy is what makes sure they all get a vote. And the Constitution is what makes sure the sheep is not dinner. Mm-hmm. And so I'm fine with if we got everybody to vote, step one. And then we started doing a better job of making sure that we were educating people, making sure that people weren't abusing the system through campaign finance reform, et cetera. Mm-hmm. I'm far less worried about what people do, because even if if we got 90%, they could actually pass constitutional amendments. But I don't think we're at a point. Maybe I have too much confidence in people. You would think that wouldn't be the case considering what I do most of the time.
If you're elected to a position of high power, she can be the check, I'll be the balance, right? We'll just make it a three thing, right? We'll just follow you around, make sure.
You guys going to vote for us when we take over the world? Just the three of us? So getting off the voting thing for a second, there is part of this where we're talking about educating people on political issues, but I think one of the things that all three of us care about really passionately is making sure we're educating people on science-based issues, and Cara being the foremost expert in that. Let me ask you, I'm an idiot. Would you start with that?
That's not a question.
So it's the groundwork for a question.
Okay.
Oh, I wish we were recording, because that would be my ringtone tonight.
I live in a world where there's internet access all over the place on my phone, and I can look up the answer to any question. And it seems that there's just everything everybody could want to know is out there on the internet. How do we know which of it's wrong?
It's an important question, and I think it's important that we point out that this is not new. Like, yes, the internet is new, and yes, access to more information than we ever had in the past is new, but fake news, which I even hate using that term because it's so like co-opted and misused by...
It just makes me feel dirty when I say it.
Well, did you guys see that crazy tweet where Trump basically just admitted that fake news is anything that disagrees with him? He like said it in the tweet. So that's not actually the definition of fake news. But actual fake news or echo chamber kind of propaganda is there, but it's always been there. So I want to kind of say that first. Since the beginning of elections, there's
even
been
when you had to
slaying
go to
of
the public library,
Absolutely.
you still don't have any more. There's 10 books on this particular issue, and you don't have any more access to which one's going to be reasonable.
Yeah, just because a book is in a library doesn't mean that it's full of evidence-based knowledge. You know.
See, Seth, I told you, getting your book in the library doesn't do you any good at all.
And so, I'd been so good at the Dewey Decimal System. I mean, it's just such a waste.
So confusing.
Oh, yeah.
I remember. I may be the youngest one up here. I could be wrong. I don't know.
You're the youngest one up here.
But I still had to use the Dewey Decimal System. I remember the card catalog, having to go in. It was
Anybody here
complicated.
remember a microfiche?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And those old school overhead projectors about the size of a Buick. They'd roll them in. Yeah.
I'm working on my PhD right now, and there are still times when I have to go through interlibrary loan to get microfiche versions of certain articles, and it's super weird.
I think we'll
to read them.
retitle this First World Problems.
So like 20 years ago, they were telling us there would be the paperless office, and and I've got more paper in my life. Forgive me, Cara, I walked all over you.
No.
Go ahead.
I actually just moved over to an iPad Pro, and I love it. I don't use paper anymore at all. It's amazing.
Oh, we know where the endorsement check's going.
That would be nice. I'll take it, Apple.
I have to have some paper, but continue, because we're trying to figure out, we can't all be experts on everything.
No.
So we have to demonstrate some confidence in experts.
Yes.
And we know that as great as peer review is, it's still potentially awful and abusable. And so just because there's an article there that's been referenced that is peer-reviewed and cited in a bunch of places, it could be wrong.
It could be, but there's a way better chance that if you're reading a peer-reviewed article that's not been retracted, that it's got better evidence than maybe
Jim Bob's website?
Yeah, or like a BuzzFeed listicle. You know what I mean? Like and I love BuzzFeed. I think that they do a lot of really good journalism, but there is kind of a certain amount of, I guess we could say, media literacy that's required that kind of has nothing to do with whether or not you're a scientist or whether or not you studied any particular thing in school or even went to school. I do think that media literacy is an important kind of new skill that we need to develop culturally.
I remember when The Onion first started.
I love The Onion.
And I used to love The Onion. Now I hate The Onion.
Oh no, what happened? Do I need to hate The Onion too?
No, you don't need to
Tell
hate
me
The
how to
Onion.
think, Matt.
I hate... I will. It's not that I actually hate The Onion. I hate the Onion effect. Because when people were kind of, oh, this was hip and this is satire and we get it and it's funny and we shouldn't take these seriously. But now there's like 50,000 copies of The Onion with all these people trying to write the most outlandish headlines. And I've even seen some where they take a real news story and then they inject the comedy, and you can like find a button somewhere to click off the fake parts. I worry, I don't ever give short answers because I'm terrified of being misunderstood. So I speak more than I probably should for clarity. And I worry because those articles show up all the time, every day, from somebody who thinks they're real, and you have to be, it's satire, it's satire, it's satire. I love free speech. I love the fact that people are out there doing things that are funny. But when we get to the point where parody and satire are seemingly indistinguishable from reality, in part because of who we've elected, it's frustrating for me.
Well, but isn't that the important point that you just made? It's partially because this satire is so well engineered, but it's also because reality has a satirical bent to it right now. Like, it's very hard to tell what is real news and what is comedy news because every day is a comedy of errors in our country.
So on the science front, which is what I was asking about. So let's say I see, we know science communicators are, well, you're amazing, but some of them are awful.
Ooh, name names, please.
No. I don't mean individuals. I mean the process by which scientists announce some discovery or something that they're working on.
Oh, the actual communication.
And then the
side.
news, the communication of that to the public is such that, we've found the God gene, or today, which I shared, thanks to Sean Carroll, evidently we've transferred memories from one slug to another.
Cool.
And it is cool. And the first comment, by the way, was somebody posted, I for one, welcome our new slug overlords. But without any more rambling, what's the best tips we can give people when they're out seeing news stories about science, about how much to believe it and how to go about researching to find out whether or not they should?
It's hard because I think that this runs the same parallel, and Seth, I'm interested if you agree with me. I mean, media literacy, science media literacy, skepticism in general takes effort. And it's really the same thing. Like, being a skeptical thinker is not really any different than utilizing these skills to decide which news articles are legitimate and which ones are probably overblowing some sort of topic. It's the same checks and balances that you have to have on yourself. Does it first gut check, right? Like, does it feel too good to be true, or is there something about it that seems too good to be true? But that's not enough. Face validity, as they would call it in statistics or psychometrics, that's not enough. And then, is it a reputable source? How do you know? What is the track record of that source? Sometimes we get down to the level, and I don't think anybody's expected to do this on a regular basis, but somebody like myself who communicates science for a living, I get down to the level of, is that reporter reputable? Is that, that person who is writing about it reputable? What did the press release say? Is this just a repackage of the press release? Does it feel like it has language in it that sounds advertorial? That's very common. Are they trying to sell you something? Usually that makes it, or are they trying to sell their book? that might make it a little bit, not necessarily untrue, but it might raise these red flags. And unfortunately, there's no formula and there's no checklist. I wish there were, but because there's not, you really have to take all these different things into consideration when you're trying to answer those kinds of questions. And honestly, that's why, like, the podcast that I have worked on now for the last couple of years, The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, that's why it exists, is to help answer those kinds of questions week after week, almost in an exhausting way, because you can't expect everybody to have those skills and to be correct all the time. I mean, I make mistakes constantly. I'm constantly duped by well-written write-arounds that are well-intentioned, or maybe they're not well-intentioned. It's very, very difficult sometimes to separate the meat from the garbage. That's not an analogy.
The difficulty for
You know, there's meat and there's garbage.
I think there's a culture of people that is the internet and the plethora of both good and bad information has made them better skeptics, because being aware of the fact that there's a load of misinformation has them more on alert, doing the types of things you're talking about. But you and I have a mutual friend. I won't name him because I don't know if he hasn't volunteered himself for this experiment, but he wrote an article, blog, whatever. And the opening lines of the article said, and the headline was insane. It was just some crazy over-the-top lie. And he started the article by saying, everything that you're going to read in this article under the headline is a complete lie. This is bogus. I'm making this up. I'm totally full of shit. You don't believe a word I say. I mean, he literally spent all of this time, and he just threw it out there as an experiment. Mm-hmm. And what happened was a huge number of people saw the headline. It spoke to the confirmation bias thing, and they went into outrage mode, and they shared it and tweeted it and showed all that. They didn't bother to read. And then the people who went in and read the fact that it was not true were mad at the author for duping them. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we're in a sort of we're not really made to endure this avalanche of nonstop global I mean, every atrocity, every freak story, every political scandal, everything that happens in real time all across the planet is jammed into the Twitterverse. And I feel like I'm not wired for this. I'm overwhelmed by it. And many people, I think, become headline-only people. Mm-hmm. And they react only on the headline and take no further journey into the rabbit hole.
And the headlines are really dangerous. I mean, just one example, when I was first working in journalism, I wrote about the Higgs boson when it was first, when evidence was found to support the hypothesis. And so I was writing about the announcement that was made, and kind of we all knew as science journalists that, like, this was going to be the announcement. Like, they invited Higgs. Like, that tells you something. And I wrote this long article, or actually it might have been a video back then. I was doing these, like, little video blogs, and I was saying, here, let me give you a breakdown of what it is and how it gives things mass. I like consulted all these physicists because it was really hard to understand. And then I did this whole rant about how I hate it when people call it the God particle. So let me just explain to you why they call it the God particle. It's actually shortened from the goddamn particle because it was so goddamn hard to find. Like, that's really why it was named that. And
that's not true.
Yeah, it is true.
That's the best story
of
the day.
And so people would mistaken it. The God part. It's like, no, it's not mystical. It's like these physicists were frustrated. And so I say that, and then I deliver my article to my editor, and then my editor delivers it to copy, and then the headline is God particle found, because we don't write our own headlines. And so that screws a lot of journalists too, because they don't have any control over that. And a lot of times it really is a function of trying to get more people to click. Let's make a clickbait headline. Hopefully the article is well written and people will read past it, but as we know from multiple media literacy studies, even with kind of school-aged kids who are trained in media literacy, most of them don't read past the headline. If they do read past the headline, they don't click through any of the internal links for other sources, and a very small percentage of people actually look for corroborating evidence to decide whether or not.
Because who's got time?
Exactly, because who's got time?
Is it clickbait, or is it that they're trying to simplify it for an 8th grade level of education?
No, it's clickbait.
It's both. I mean, I think a big thing changed during the Reagan administration and a little bit previous when we started to make the news a money-making endeavor. You know, historically, the 7 o'clock news, the 9 o'clock news, they couldn't advertise against it. So the programs, like the scripted television shows that came on before it, a portion of their budget went to fund the news on those networks. And there were laws in place that protected kind of the sanctity of the news. And when those laws were lifted and all bets kind of were off, we started to see that the news was monetized. And the minute that there's a capitalist kind of push to try and make money from the news, of course you're only going to get the ambulance chases. Of course you're only going to get the headlines that really make people go, wow.
I wonder how much, one of the things that I teach every night when I'm doing this through a couple different things is that skepticism is not cynicism.
Yeah.
Skepticism is attempting to confirm and then either confirming or failing to confirm. But if you're going into it with this notion of debunking, that is more along the lines of cynicism. But something Seth mentioned, when you have so many different headlines, when people begin to become aware that there's good information and bad information on the internet, if they don't have the time, I wonder how that plays into people's cynicism of, let me just dismiss all of this, and now you end up with the conspiracy theorist stuff. Mm-hmm. And quick side note, I say this pretty much everywhere, there's a documentary called Room 237, which I've seen 8 or 9 times now and recommend to everybody. It is about Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, and it goes through with almost no narration or commentary and shows the various conspiracy theories that have been built around this movie. If you ever want to get into the mind and see how people develop these things, watch that documentary. It's outstanding for getting a grip on that, but I worry that lots of people I talk to say, oh yeah, I'm a skeptic. Are they? And does I don't come up with a litmus test, and I'm like, oh, you skepticism, you have to do X, Y, and Z, or you have to believe A, B, and C. But I run into people who think that they are skeptical when everything about how they go about reasoning kind of shows that they're not, that they are in fact more cynical, so they're thinking that.
Or they're conspiratorial.
Yeah.
Because a lot of conspiracy believers call themselves skeptics.
Yes, because
they're better
confused.
skeptics, right?
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
more skeptical than the skeptics.
Oh, yes. They're skeptical of their skepticism and skeptical of that. And then there's other people who just scoff at skepticism. I did an event in Toronto with Jordan Peterson, and the one mild regret that I have, I called him on a number of things, but he kind of mocked skepticism under his breath. And it came at a time where I didn't want to interrupt, and I didn't want to, there was so much going on in that conversation, I didn't want to dig down there. But I wonder, I really want to find the people that scoff at skepticism to find out what it is they think they're scoffing at. Because for me, it's just, I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible, so I go for the methods that are most likely to give me consistently useful and seemingly correct answers.
Yeah, I mean, to me, skepticism is indistinguishable from scientific thought. It's, let's find things that have evidence that support them. If there is no evidence that supports it because it's outside of the realm of experimental evidence or even correlational evidence, then maybe that's a philosophical debate that we can have, Like, I am, for example, an atheist. I don't believe in God, but I don't get into skeptical arguments with people about God. I can talk to you at an atheist level, I think, about that, but there are certain things that are kind of outside of the realm of scientific inquiry. We can talk about like metaphysics, and we can approach these things from a philosophical standpoint, and we can actually have, I think, really important arguments about it, like really important arguments about it. But you cannot disprove or prove the existence of God using science.
Sure.
You just can't do it.
But you don't have to disprove
And you don't
it.
have to, right?
The burden of proof's on them.
Absolutely. But for me, the idea of skepticism really comes down to, we talk about, there's a lot of things. It's about balancing being open-minded. It's like you want to be so open-minded that your brains don't fall out, all that kind of stuff. And it's about looking at things through a scientific lens. To me, it's indistinguishable. And I think that's why when the novellas and Evan reached out to me a few years ago and said, hey, do you want to join us on the Skeptics Guide? And I was like, what's a skeptic? Like, I was not in the community. I had never heard that label. I didn't really understand it. I was already one because I was a scientific thinker, and I was already promoting scientific skepticism. I just didn't know what it was called.
Now, Seth, you and I mean, we run in slightly different circles. We're all skeptics. We are all atheists. We're all humans. Seth and I tend to focus more on the religious angle in philosophy. But I was a skeptic first and just didn't apply it to my religious views until some point. How did you come to this?
To skepticism or atheism or both?
Both.
Ooh.
Tell us everything about your life, O master of the voice.
If you ask my fundamentalist family, I knelt at the altar of the Dark Lord and bathed myself in blood, and I had Black Sabbath on the radio and
Backwards.
backwards.
Yeah.
Well, for those who aren't familiar with my story, just in a quick nutshell, I'm the product of a fundamentalist Christian home. My mother wrote a Greek New Testament study guide. My parents met at Oral Roberts University, okay? Religious schools. I was a Christian broadcaster for 12 years. I was a Christian radio host, a minister of the gospel. I wasn't a preacher, but my parents were just busting a button because they were so excited that their son was doing God's good work. And you know, I came from a faith culture, which is why I started the Thinking Atheist. I'm not the Thinking Atheist. It's an icon where instead of I'd rather know than just believe. And so I wanted to create an icon where, you know, let's not just take it on faith. Let's go encourage each other to think about these things. But I'd been sort of dormant in the faith. Things weren't adding up. There was about 1,000 things you can read about in the book if you're interested, or just, you know, go to my website. But I was scrolling the internet, and I stumbled. This sounds like a cliche. It sounds like I pulled it out of my ass. I stumbled upon a debate video with Christopher Hitchens. And I mean, the atheist, and he's taking on a rabbi, and the atheist is going to get his ass kicked. Watch this, right? I'm not even Jewish, and I was thinking the rabbi was going to kick his ass. And at the end of that 90 minutes, I was working on support graphics at a video production house. And at the end of that 90 minutes, I just felt like something had just gone through me. Like, what just happened? I mean, he just slaughtered the guy. I mean, just hitch slapped that boy. Boom. And so I started clicking on other video. Oh, and then I hear other names I'd never heard. Who's this Dawkins cat? Never heard of that guy before. And Dan Barker and Charles Templeton, the former Canadian evangelist. And before I knew it, I was like anybody who's come out of the sort of the desert of religion into the oasis of information knows what it's like, because you feel like you're making up for lost time, and everybody around you is going, what's the matter with you? Are you obsessed? All you're doing is atheist. All you're doing is watching and reading and watching and reading. And I'm like, yes, all I'm doing. All I want to do is watch and read. And at the end of that journey, I realized that there was no there, that I had been living an assumed belief. I had taken it on faith. But when I added everything up, I realized I was an atheist. I was a non-theist. And I decided, you know, I'll never be a great mind scientist. I'll never be Cara Santa Maria, ladies and gentlemen.
Stop.
No, but I mean, I'll never be, you hear Dawkins, all these erudite types. I'll never be that cat. They look up to them. They relate to me. And so my life became about trying to make the journey out easier for others. Can anybody relate to that? Okay. Sorry for the long answer, my friend.
Absolutely.
That's what happens when you ask a broadcaster a question about his life.
I'm doing my best to make sure that I don't talk more than everybody else, because
right.
I'm prone to doing
It
that.
is
I can also do the
your
weather
show.
for you if you'd like. Partly sunny skies today, 72 degrees. Beautiful weekend on town. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
And the cool, so if you ever get a chance, is your slideshow presentation up that has the pictures of you with the various Christian rock bands who came to the studio and stuff?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, where you have the old hair.
Yeah, it's called Seth Andrews. I just turned 50. Don't. You'll encourage it, okay? You'll encourage it. But yeah, if you look up Seth Andrews turns 50 on YouTube, I have pictures of me in Christian school in a clip-on necktie with American flags on it from Christian school. I have a mullet in my Christian radio days in the studio. You can see all those humiliating 80s photographs online.
So how old were you when you came out as an atheist?
38.
38. What about you?
About 30, 31.
Wow.
Something like that. Yeah,
Very
we're
different.
slow.
Very different.
Yeah.
We're slow.
And I beat myself. Do you ever beat yourself like, God, why was I so thick? Because then you meet people who are like, well, hell, I knew this was bullshit when I was 7.
Yeah.
They're all clapping right now. I came out when I was 15.
Yeah.
15 was...
My wife was about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is, in gosh, I wish she was here. One of these days I'm going to come back with Beth because I love when she tells her story. So she was about 14, and she was interested in genetics, and so she would do like Punnett scores for fun. She now has a master's in microbiology, but she was reading the story of Jacob and Laban and the sheep, and you could keep these. And so it was talking about breeding them, staring at spotted sticks and beating them with and she's like, that's not how genes are manipulated.
With sticks.
So she, but she kept it hidden. And all the way through grad school, even, she was still teaching vacation Bible school because she didn't want to come out to her family. And as it turned out, it's probably a good thing, since a good chunk of the family ostracized her for about 4 years or so. And that's, the Magic and Skepticism tour thing, and, occasionally, I think even the conversation I had with Douglas Murray was billed as Magic and Skepticism, but that's not what it was. But since we're all up here tonight, one of the big reasons I do this is to make sure that the local communities in the various areas, people find out about them. So during the Q&A tonight, which is not too far away, if you are a member of a local organization and you want to get up on the mic to just tell people who you are and what you're about, feel free to do that as well, because directing people to the various communities is one of the primary goals for me doing this.
Oh, that's great. That's so different than what I'm used to during Q&As at the ends of talks, when I say, if anybody has a question, which ends in a question mark.
Yes, and does not.
Then you can ask your question during the Q&A.
Yeah, you don't get to do like a 4-hour advertisement for your organization, but if you want to direct people to it, that's good.
I wanted to say, honestly, to go back to faith and science and skepticism. When I was a believer, I was taught to distrust you.
Oh, yeah.
The scientists, when you're in fundamentalism, at least in my case, scientists were all this like star chamber of, they all agree, right? There's your first problem. But they're all on this quest, this anti-God quest, to try to kill the sacred and try to explain the stuff that we consider to be transcendent, to rob us of the human experience. And so I would have looked at you and thought, this poor, it's a poor woman who she's now worshiping at the Church of Science. And now, to be able to see science for what it is, as just a layperson. And we talked earlier, we were having a conversation about how can we, as just people who don't have PhDs, participate in sort of the making every day a discovery, being part of this scientific answer to those questions. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have, because people get intimidated by science and scientists, right?
Absolutely.
What do you, if someone's like, well, I'm not a scientist, so I can't really say.
Yeah,
but that's not really how we should approach those things,
No,
right?
and that's the problem. Actually, that's a cop-out that politicians use all the time. They're like, I'm not a scientist, so when it comes to this climate change thing, but then they're really intent on their economic policy, and it's like, you're not an economist either. It's like they've got opinions about other things. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I promote that, obviously. That's like part of what I do, is to try and promote scientific skepticism among everybody. And I think that
scientists aren't taught to speak like in a language that most people get, right? You're all about detail, and about nuance and...
Yeah, but every job is like that, and I really encourage people to remember that. Like, I do not understand a thing that my plumber tells me when he comes over to, I just did a massive house renovation, and I needed a dictionary to understand all the terms that were used. That's any field you work in, you're going to have a lexicon. You're going to have a shorthand that helps you communicate with one another. The more specialized you get, the more you're going to start to talk about things that feel esoteric to the rest of the world. I don't think that's, it's just a science thing. And
it's definitely not just in science, because when you dig in on philosophy, as a matter of fact, Scott was mentioning this earlier, that he's basically challenging something William Lane Craig says, but if he doesn't get the verbiage exactly the way this individual wants it, now you've got to go back and retrace your steps. And it's one of the things I constantly point out, I'm not an expert in anything. And when people say, oh, Matt's just a dilettante, yeah. And when people like the Jordan Peterson fans were like, oh, you're just too stupid to understand what Jordan's saying. And I was like, that one I don't buy, but it's really nice of you to say so. But the thing is, if there's anything I've gotten good at over the years of doing the show, it's taking complex topics that I understand and making it so that anybody can understand. It's not dumbing down, and it's not let's chuck out the dictionary. It is about figuring out where people are, meeting them where they are, and having that conversation. Because I don't think there's, even some of the really difficult stuff, quantum physics and stuff like that.
Which, by the way, most of them don't even understand.
Yes.
They always tell me that when I interview them.
I hear that every time. But at least, like Sean Carroll, I understand what he's saying.
He's a really good science communicator.
Exactly. There are other people, I don't have a clue.
Yeah, and so I also teach science communication. We do this really great event. It's actually here in LA, if anybody's ever interested, called SciComm Camp. It's once a year, and it's this grown-up sleepaway camp where we go stargazing and make s'mores, but we also learn about...
Is there a prom?
There's a dance party. Actually,
yes.
We call it a science carnival. But it's so much fun, and we have a lot of workshops and breakout sessions and things like that. It's kind of an unconference kind of model, and people from all different stages of their careers. Whenever I talk to people about science communication, you just touched on 3 of the top 5 things that are just fundamentally important. Number 1, know your audience. Know who's in the room and try and meet them where they are.
I can't even see them.
Yeah.
Front row's asleep.
Makes it difficult.
Emery, you out there? All right.
And something that I think is really important, it's the one that I think a lot of people really kind of latch onto, is I always say, never underestimate the intelligence of your audience, but always underestimate their vocabulary. There are so many concepts in science that are not that hard to understand if you paint a picture, if you use analogy appropriately, and if you take the one word that has a really complicated definition and break it down into the 7 words that might be more useful to explain what it is. That's really all it takes. And I think this view that there are topics in science, that there are ideas in science that are too hard for people who don't have PhDs to understand is BS. The tenets of science are very easy to understand, but a lot of people just don't have the vocabulary. And that's why I get frustrated when I'm doing TV work and the producers are like, can you dumb it down? They'll come up, I'm interviewing a scientist, and they'll come up and be like, can you talk to me like my grandma? Could you just dumb it down a little? And I'm like, you just lost your scientist. They get so pissed when you ask them to do that for good reason. Because they don't want to dumb down their work. Their work's important. And also, it's underestimating the audience. It's why would you do that? Why would you talk down to people who you're trying to share this amazing passion with? I
think you can get to a lot of clarity, but also, and I've seen Dawkins do this as well, where he's like, let him grab a damn dictionary and look it up afterwards, because I communicated the idea, and if there's one word that was a sticking point, somebody can ask about it or they can look it up, and now they've learned something else as well.
And Dawkins is also very British.
Yes.
And we are very American, and the landscapes are different, too.
Yes,
the television
we speak
landscapes.
English rightly.
When I was...
oh, God.
I'm a storyteller, so obviously everything I look at, I see in terms of storytelling, twofold. But when I first came into activism, I was struck by, we had so much amazing information, but we had so few storytellers. Mm. And people want to go on a journey. People want to be drawn in. I took a lot of heat at the beginning producing videos that used emotive music and editing and those types of things to try to engage all the senses. And unlike religion, where you start with the heart and the head may or may not show up later, the brain, we want to engage the brain first, but the other senses get to follow. We want you to feel something. You can feel something about what you're thinking about. And I've seen us come a long way, but it is interesting. It's like our space program over the past half century is one of the greatest success stories of humankind, okay? Seeing us as explorers in outer space, overcoming the impossible. And this is much less true today, but when I first wrote about it 10 years ago, what's one of the least compelling channels on television? The NASA channel. Right? If you want to learn about the shuttle program and the Apollo program, you go to Discovery and all these other places who knew how to tell the story of our journey into outer space. And I think we as communicators, and not just people on stage who are activists, scientists, what have you, the people who are at the office in the cubicles who are communicating with family and friends, if we can become better storytellers, telling us a story rooted in fact and not cheating the brain by engaging the heart, I think we'll do a much better job of changing minds.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and the evidence shows that. I mean, for so long, science communicators literally thought that if we just said it a little louder, then maybe people would get, climate change is real, you guys. And then we realized that it's not a knowledge deficit problem. I mean, that's part of it. There is a knowledge deficit to some extent, but most people who are actively rejecting certain types of information have heard the evidence-based narrative, and they have then rejected it.
Now, if you're Oklahoma Senator Jim Inhofe, it's a knowledge deficit. You walk into the House of Representatives holding a snowball and going, "It got cold today. Climate change is a lie." He has a knowledge deficit.
But and that's also, I think, a real struggle for a lot of people who work in this line of work. And I shouldn't even keep talking about it as if it's a job. Like, it's a struggle for all of us, right? Because we've all been at the dinner with family, and we've all been at work having the conversation with coworkers, and I think there is this really difficult thing where we want to, like, convince everyone.
Like, if only I say it one more time like this, they'll get
Yeah,
it.
or even if only I bring this other nugget and I'm just not approaching it right. And for many people, that's true. It's like the swing voters, right? The undecided. It's like, for many people, it's true. It's about adjusting the narrative, changing the story, having the beautiful anecdote, using the analogy. But there are some people who you're probably not going to change their mind. And I think that obsessing over that small but loud minority can actually be quite detrimental to having a more effective message.
Forgive me, Matt. Dale McGowan set up, and I use this in the criteria for whether or not I will engage someone privately, not if other people are watching or listening, which is a different animal that Matt can speak to better than me. But if someone has a much greater desire to believe than they have to know, then, and I know that I can't break through that, then I know just how much time I need to spend or not spend on that person. Is their desire to believe so much greater than their desire to know that I'll never get through the wall, or at least at this moment in their life, and then I know I can move on after my case is made the first time.
Yeah, because then at that point, you're not an educator, you're not a science communicator, you're not a skeptic, you're just a different kind of preacher.
Or I'm an adversary in some way.
Yeah, and so what's the point of that?
Yeah.
So I won't do it on stage, but later on, we'll have a conversation about believe versus no.
Is this just like teasing everybody
It's
in
a
the audience?
serendipitous thing. We just skipped
We'll
right
talk
into
about
it.
that
Yeah.
backstage. You guys won't be.
There are some of them who've already heard it, but there's two things I wanted to touch on. Both this idea of emotion. As I teach people about argumentation and making sure that they're at least aware of the structure of a syllogism and what is and isn't a fallacy, I also keep pointing out lessons that I've learned, in particular one lesson from my wife, which is you don't have to and probably shouldn't name the fallacy. Like, hey, that's an argument from ignorance, because if they don't know what that means, you just called them stupid. And so it's far better to explain what is actually wrong with the argument. And then if you want to add in later on, by the way, there's a formal, argumentum ad ignorantum, blah, blah, blah. But there's a difference between a fallacious appeal to emotion and just appealing to emotion.
Oh, yeah.
If the mere fact that you're telling a story that touches people, one of my go-to arguments, what's my number one go-to argument? Slavery. Because it's so obvious. It should be easy. I am accessing people's emotion to recognize that it is obviously wrong to own people and beat them and have them as property. That does not make the argument fallacious, the fact that we are appealing to emotions. And we have to recognize that in all of these situations, whether we're talking about religion, whether we're talking about science, that we are talking to people, and people feel things. And one of the biggest problems is when people put what they feel ahead of what they actually understand. And so if you can get to people's feelings and boost understanding at the same time, by being clear, by making sure that you're not involved in fallacious attempts, you're going to reach people.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
Margaret Downey, who I adore, was probably the first person in the atheist community to bring up what I heard Seth talk about, which is we need more people telling stories. When you go to the convention, yes, it's nice to have a bunch of lectures. Here's a philosophy lecture, one on arguing, here's on debates, here's how to do a podcast, all this other stuff. But the most valuable thing for many of them is for somebody to get up and tell their story of how they got from here to here, because there are people out there who are convinced that they are alone, that they are the only one. And it's another reason that I kind of push for community at these events.
I think one of the reasons that some people in the free thought community blanch at emotion is because they were emotionally manipulated by the church.
Exactly.
And so they feel, and almost in like a Vulcan-like way, they feel like they need to go, and we're only about the facts and the logic. And because they'll never manipulate me again. You'll never trick me again. And I understand those defense mechanisms. I think they're perfectly understandable.
There's another one that goes along with that, and that is the secular community on a whole has a problem generating funds because they don't want to be viewed as passing the offering plate. And the people who donated money for churches forever are like, oh, I'm not going to donate to these things. So thank you all for buying tickets to this event this evening.
Send your check to Save the Dillahunty Foundation.
Thank you for not saying save the whale.
Oh, that's.
Hey, I'm down 45 pounds in the last two years. So
I'm telling you, when I saw you, I hadn't seen you in a couple of years. Like I was like, damn, you look
just wanted
good.
to rub all over that bald head there.
I gave you a
It's
big
awesome.
hug.
I know.
But you know what? I think this line of kind of thought is an important one, and it's something for me personally that I've been struggling with quite a bit lately. So I am somebody who is pretty outspoken about having a long history of struggling with mental illness. Like, it's really important to me to kind of erase the stigma around that. So I talk quite publicly about having been diagnosed with depression since I was a child, about taking medication. I'm now working towards a PhD in clinical psychology in my free time, and it's so fascinating, but it's been so trying for me because it's really like the antithesis of what I've prided myself at being good at, which is all cognitive. You know what I mean? It's all intellectualizing. It's all argumentation. And it's really opened my mind up to how important understanding the emotional self and being aware of the fact that as human beings, we are not just all overt cognition all the time. We react to things emotionally. We have instincts and insights that we can't always access verbally. We feel reactions long before we can articulate what it is that's going on. And I think I've broadened my understanding. And I think to parallel what you were talking about before about how an argument from emotion or an appeal to emotion is not the same, like committing a fallacy is not the same as utilizing it as a tool. And for me, it's the same thing when we talk about anecdote. Right? In science, you always hear the cliche that the plural of evidence is not or the plural of anecdote is not evidence, right? Butchered that one. Because people love to talk about, but my aunt did this thing and they got, colonic, or they got, they went to a naturopath and they got rid of their cancer with herbs. And you have to be like, it's just an anecdote. Let's look at all of the evidence. But the truth of the matter is, as a science communicator, I use anecdote all the time to try to tell compelling stories about science. But I'm using anecdote to tell stories that are then based in evidence. And that's the important thing. I'm not trying to talk about the exception to the rule.
It makes me wonder, and you mentioned this, and we talked about it earlier, but I'll kind of replay it in a slightly different fashion. If I hear somebody give an anecdote about something that worked for them, I have to consider it in the face of what I already understand. My brain goes through a heuristic. What do I know about this person? What do I know about this? And all this other thing. But by and large, if we have a sort of try-it mentality, we go by what we feel. So if I'm going to my naturopath or whatever, and they're filling me full of, water quite often.
Yeah.
But I don't feel bad, or I convince myself that I'm feeling better, then the thing becomes less about this is making me healthy, then this is not making me feel bad, so why not keep doing it?
Oh, yeah,
And
that's
so now
common.
now there's sort of an onus to demonstrate that you may in fact be doing harm. And in some
Yeah.
cases we can do that, and in some cases we can't. But I always tend to address it, and this will go down the belief path, because we act in accordance with our beliefs. You can become convinced for good reasons or bad reasons, and being wrong feels exactly like being right until you find out you're wrong.
And that's always
And then it
fun.
sucks.
Yeah, because it's not being wrong we're afraid of. It's being exposed as having been wrong. And if we can just encourage people to say, I don't know more, and to be more skeptical, to think more critically, but to recognize that just because you don't see the harm in something doesn't mean there's not harm there. And just because you feel a certain way about something doesn't mean that that's what's actually happening. That you feel, oh, I feel healthier, I feel more alive. You could be dying and just be, have, an endorphin high or...
That's like when the people throw their
adrenaline
crutches
high.
at the faith healer and say, I'm healed, and then they go home and die.
Yeah, they're on an adrenaline high.
I mean, it happens all the time,
And it's so important. Like a good example would be I recently had a friend who had a sty in their eye, and they told me that when they were growing up, that the treatment was to put like a gold ring on their eye. Like their parents told them, like if you put a gold ring on your eye, and then somebody else was like, no, you should put a tea bag on your eye. And I was like, really, there's like no good medicine. Just keep it clean. Sometimes a hot compress can help, but other than that, and they were like, no, but it worked. Like 4 days later, it was gone. And I was like, yeah, because that's how long it takes a sty to go away. And that's the frustrating thing, is that there are things that seem to work.
Yeah.
Because this is very, very common with pseudoscience and pseudomedicine, right? Is because like that's just how long it takes for your body to heal.
I took an aspirin, I said a prayer, my headache went away.
Totally. And so, yeah, on the surface, that doesn't seem dangerous. But then what about the person who actually has conjunctivitis or some sort of infection, and they put the gold ring on their eye, they put the tea on their eye, and then it gets worse, and it gets worse. And eventually, by the time they realize they need to get the antibiotic, or they should see an optometrist or something along those lines, they have corneal scarring, or they have something else that that can have a long-term detriment. And I mean, these are the stories that we hear all the time. That's why, I keep talking about the Skeptic's Guide. I think it's my it's what makes me legit.
.com. Yeah, go ahead.
Right?
Plug it away.
It is why I'm here, right? No, but
Plug it on.
we just wrote a book, and it's coming out in October, and one of the sections in the book is called Death by Pseudoscience, because we do think it's important to point out that, yeah, maybe your friend who goes to the naturopath and gets prescribed turmeric pills, and who takes these turmeric pills is like, whatever, it can't hurt, and it doesn't make me sick. But then, like, some lady got a turmeric infusion from her naturopath, and it killed her. And like these things it's important to see what happens when you actually do take it to the extreme, or when it's preventing people from getting the appropriate treatment that they need.
While we're venting about the things that make us crazy.
Pseudoscience.
One of the things that drives me really crazy, one of the driving things, one of the many things that drive me in my fight against religious belief, fundamentalist religious belief specifically, it's like when we talk about emotion, religion tells us that those feelings are actually part of a spiritual realm, and religion owns those transcendent type feelings, what you feel at the birth of a child, or when you fall in love, or when you experience a sunset, or when any of those things happen in our lives. We hear a beautiful piece of music, and religion says, we own that. You're just borrowing it. They do it when it comes to love, when it comes to morality, especially altruistic morality. They do it when it comes to community. It's amazing. There are people who would see us come together if, let's say this was like an atheist gathering, they would call this atheist church,
yeah.
right? Because any gathering of people celebrating a single thing or being a part of a single thing is automatically some sort of church. They grabbed ownership of something that people do naturally. Like, we are communal creatures. I'm better with you, most of you. I'm better with you, right? I'm relatively estranged from my immediate family. So in many ways, you are the family that I choose. My life is better with you in it. You challenge me.
So sweet.
You challenge me. No, you challenge me, you encourage me, you remind me I'm not crazy, I'm not alone, it's going to be okay. There are others out there going through the same journey. We are all taking this road. Community is a human experience, and yet religion says, oh yeah, we own that, you just borrow it. That makes me crazy, and it's something we should be vocally rejecting in our own lives, because religion doesn't own love or community or family or compassion or morality or purpose or any of those things. That's not a religious exercise. Those are human exercises.
Oh,
Amen.
yeah. And it's so inextricably linked to American culture in the dirtiest kind of way that it's even, I think, infected social science, because you see all of these studies that show that religious people live longer, have healthier lives, are happier. And then you're like, oh, do you not know what a confounding variable is? Like, it's so important to see when you're looking at correlational studies that it's like, yeah, because they hang out with people every Sunday. Like, there's so many things that aren't true to the religion that are just culturally, like, it's totally normal to go to church every Sunday, and that's where you catch up with your friends, and it's totally normal to go to youth group, and that's where, and so to see those kinds of things being built up in secular communities and in non-believers, I think is so important, because we also know that interaction, that human connection, that even just human touch, conversations are so fundamental to mental health, to physical health. Like, we are social beings.
There's a psychiatrist and author and activist, Dr. Andy Thompson, who was talking about the power of communal music. So if we all were to come together and sing a song together, a song that was a meaningful song, there is a physiological change that takes place in the human body. And he doesn't do it anymore because it was very difficult for some ex-fundamentalists because they were reliving. But as an experiment at the convention, he had all the atheists sing Amazing Grace together, okay? Just to
No fucking way am I singing Amazing Grace.
That's actually the third stanza. Amazing Grace, no fucking
No fucking way. That was my last vestige. It really was. Like, I was a singer all through, school. I was the one who would sing in the front of the church, and, I was like in the competitive jazz choir. I even went to college to study vocal jazz performance before I left that and went into science. And when I left the church, it was the last thing keeping me there, because I legitimately thought when I sang and I had goosebumps that I was feeling the Spirit.
Yeah.
And then I realized I just really like music.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like my world opened up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
On that note, we'll go ahead and bring the house lights up a little bit, and people can line up at the question.
Everybody having a good time?
Questions?
Everybody?
Whoa, there's like people out there.
I know.
They're still really hard to see, though. I don't know if it's like these spots are the really bad
So
ones.
if Matt was to direct a choir, or if he was directing music when the song was over, would he just look at them all and go, "You're done"?
Yep.
Would that be how he finishes?
So a couple things about questions. They end in a question mark. They don't start with your life story or dissertation. And yes, you can point out what group you're with. But before we actually get to questions, there's one thing I want to do, if my audio thing is still open, because this was fun for me.
What is it?
I sent Seth a message like just a couple weeks before I started the tour in April, and I was like, I'm going to be walking out as kind of a one-man show thing. Could you maybe like record some welcome to the show introduction for me? And he's like, yeah, sure. And then I didn't hear anything for a while. And it was a few days before we were getting ready to head out, and I got this clip. It's a minute long, and here you go.
Hey, bro, sorry it took me so long to get this to you. I just zoned out. Just sitting here on my phone. I forgot to do it. My fault. Here we go. Let me give you a few different versions of this, and you can choose the one you want, okay? Hello, and welcome to Magic and Skepticism with Matt Dillahunty. Hello, and welcome to Magic and Skepticism with Matt Dillahunty. Hello, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Magic and Skepticism with Matt Dillahunty. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Magic and Skepticism with Matt Dillahunty. Ladies and gentlemen, Get ready to disbelieve your eyes and engage your mind. Welcome to Magic and Skepticism with Matt Dillahunty. Okay, hopefully one of those will work for you, brother. If not, let me know, okay?
Yes.
Oh
That
my
is
God.
so sweet. You're a trooper for letting him play that, too.
I went with
I'm
the
a
last
giver.
one.
I'm a giver.
That's so sweet.
I was glad to do it. Matt's a brother, and he's, in my opinion, one of the best communicators on out there today, and he's someone of a man of integrity. I was glad to help out. So
I love it because I gave him almost no instruction, and I get back this perfect little 1-minute clip. I picked out the one I wanted. There were a number of different options. That's what happens when you ask Seth for a favor. When Seth asked me for a favor, like, hey, can you record 15 minutes on the afterlife and send it to me? How long was that?
45.
45 minutes, yeah. So hopefully we won't have that. You can say your name if you want to. You can direct a question to any of us or all of us, and I will do my best not to give 20-minute lectures for every single question. You want to start with left or right?
You're just going to go back and forth?
Why not?
I don't know. Left is sinister.
All right.
But then again, that's stage left. That's audience left. Oh, my God, I don't know.
My question is for Cara.
Oh, all right.
There you go.
Okay, my name is inconsequential. Everyone here is going to think I'm joking, and I'm not. Cara, can you please tell me what a confounding variable is?
What a what?
Confounding variable.
Oh, no, sorry.
You literally lost me.
No, yeah, I think that's actually an
Thanks.
important question. So, experimental science is very different than other types of science, which are still legitimate science. So in science, sometimes what we do is we look at big databases. So we collect data based on things that just happen in life, like cancer rates or educational, graduation rates, things like that. And then we draw inferences from them. But those inferences always have to be correlational because we didn't manipulate the variable ourselves. So there are a lot of things we can do in science, like you take a mouse in a cage and you feed this one cocaine and you feed this one sugar water and you see what happens. We can't always do that with people because it's like really unethical. Sometimes there are things we can do, but sometimes we can't, or sometimes it's just not feasible to actually manipulate the variable, so we have to look at the data after the fact and draw inferences. And the problem is there are confounds, which are interceding variables that we didn't account for. So when you're doing an experimental study, you manipulate the independent variable and you measure the outcome on the dependent variable. But when you're looking at non-experimental research, you didn't manipulate the independent variable. It just happened naturally by life, so all other things come in. A good example of this, a clean example, is when people talk about, like, I want to look at the effects of coffee drinking on insomnia. And so instead of feeding some people coffee and feeding some people decaf and then seeing how the insomnia rates change, they just survey people after the fact and they see how many people drank coffee and how many people didn't. And then they say, look, the coffee drinkers by and large had a harder time falling asleep than the non-coffee drinkers, but they never check to see if those people have nighttime jobs, if those people have newborn children, there's all sorts of what we call confounding variables that could explain some of that variance. So that's why we can only say that those things are correlated, but not that they cause the other thing. You can only say that something causes something else if you manipulate that variable, if you do experimental research. Cool. It was fun. It was like a little science class 101.
Hey, so coming from religion, and I'm still dealing with all the baggage that comes from all of that lifestyle when you're really sucked up into it. And I know, Matt, you spent all that time in the Baptist evangelical community. And then you had expressed you were heavy into it as well, Seth. And so I was just wondering, even though it's been so many years now, do you still deal with some of the baggage and some of the bullshit that comes, like emotional baggage a lot of the time too, from being that heavy into religion?
I don't, because I'm Satan incarnate. At least that's what my wife's family thought. It varies for different people. I've actually heard from people who've been atheists for 50 years, gave up religion when they were 10, and yet they'll still wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares of hell. It tends to kind of instantiate more in the interpersonal relationships. Like my relationship with my parents will never be what it was, but there's a new normal. Are the lights changing, or am I?
Yeah, they
I think
just
they
changed a
reduced
little,
them for the
which is
stage.
good. Yeah.
I lost a tooth earlier today, and I was gonna see
You
if I could.
did?
Yeah, at dinner.
Dramatically at dinner.
Was it from the lobster?
No, it was from having a bad tooth.
Oh, okay.
But the show must go on, and I'm sure somebody will give me an edible later, and I'll sleep well.
Yeah,
yeah,
you don't.
but-
It's easy here.
But yeah, so it shows up quite often in these where it's not so much you're dealing with your baggage from religion, although that will go for a long time depending on what the baggage is. One of the biggest areas is in sex relationships and people's views on sex. I mean, for the longest time, I would have thought, oh, I don't have any sex-related baggage from my upbringing. Bullshit. Loads of it, and you have to work through that. The key thing is don't beat yourself up to it. Don't beat yourself up over it. And as a reminder, people are like, they'll ask me, aren't you mad at your parents and the preachers and all these? No. They're victims as well. They were doing the best they could in trying to teach me what they believed and what they thought was valuable and that I should believe. So I'm not mad at them, and I'm not going to go down the pity train of feeling sorry for them, because now we've had ample opportunity for conversation and they don't want it.
But I'll point out that takes time.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, what religion were you raised in?
Protestant Christianity.
Okay, but it was like a fundament. It's funny because you were talking about being raised in this fundamentalist faith.
We had a sort of a cafeteria plan. Like Dad was ex-Lutheran, went to a Baptist school. Mom was Pentecostal.
Oh, okay. So I was raised Mormon, which is, a lot of people talk about that being super fundamentalist. My family's still very Mormon. My siblings, my father. But they're very pro-science, and they have a weird relationship with science, the Mormons. And I was pissed when I left the church. Like, I hated my father, and we didn't speak for 5 years, and I was really anti, and I wore an upside down crucifix for almost a decade. I was really. And it took me,
Cara Santa Maria.
right? And I have the most religious name too. But it took me a while to soften up and kind of have a more humanistic view. And I see it when my friends leave religion, throughout. There's a period for a lot of people where they get mad, and I think that's normal. And there's a period where they have the baggage. And I do think it gets way easier with time. You might still have these little things that creep up, but...
Best things you can do, get involved with other people who have had similar situations, and look out for yourself. Because as a friend of mine says, your family, if you act like family, I don't care if you're a blood relative or not, if there's somebody that is family but is a toxic influence in your life, you don't have to put up with that. You don't owe anybody an explanation for who you are or what you believe or how you're living your life.
Yeah.
I know that puts people in a position where they are terrified that they're going to be ostracized from everybody around them, because that's what happens quite frequently. But if you participate, if you get to meet some other people, it can ease that, and there's a transitioning, and you'll find that you'll end up with more valuable people in your life, which is something Seth was talking about a
No,
while
it's so
ago.
true. I mean, I see it very similarly with a lot of people in the LGBTQ community who kind of finally come to the realization that if this person is going to hate me for who I am, then they never really loved me to begin with, right? Because they loved me for who I fitting a mold that they thought I was filling, but I've always been this way. This is true to me. And so it's hard when it's your family. I mean, you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. But like you just said...
Oh, I thought you were going to do that. You can pick your friends, you can pick your nose, but you can't pick your friends.
You can pick your friend's nose. What kind of friends do you have? Come on. But really, you can pick your family in the sense that you can surround yourself with a really loving community. And I sometimes family scenarios don't heal. My experience has been that they did. I love that you use the phrase new normal. I have a new normal with my family. My father and I are not ever going to have the relationship that either of us hoped we would have, but I'm perfectly happy with the relationship that we do have.
Two quick things. One is if you're struggling with a fear of hell, which is a control mechanism. I don't want to burn forever. What if I'm wrong? Research hell. Just go through and get into the literature, all the writings of hell, the scriptures and beyond, Dante, you name it, and get into the man-made constructs of hell and see how it was used to control people. It took me a couple of years to get over it. Secondly, they're absolutely right about how people will, we call it emotional blackmail. They are blackmailing you to be like them, which is not love. And if they force your hand, it's not about agreement, it's about respect. If they won't respect boundaries, then realize that there are others taking the journey with you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And congratulations.
My wife, Cara, and I are also ex-Mormons. I 2-year mission in Mexico, baptized 75 people. I was a seminary teacher, the whole works.
Have you seen Book of Mormon, the musical?
Oh, yeah. I went with an ex-boyfriend at the time, and he was like, "You're laughing at all these things I don't understand." I was like, uh-huh. This was written for me.
Yeah, I just saw it for the first time in New York like a week or so ago. I've been listening to the soundtrack nonstop since, and I'm taking Beth to New York to see it. But when you were talking about putting the gold ring on for the sty, all I could think of was the frog.
Oh, yeah.
The sex
But
frog, yeah.
You were in it. Like, you did the mission.
Totally in it.
Wow.
Sealed in the temple, 75 people baptized. I taught seminary. I was the executive secretary in our ward, everything.
Whoa, you baptized real people. I only baptize
Yeah.
dead people.
Yeah, there's
It's
75
different.
fewer Catholics because of me. But anyway, real quick, so we lost a lot when we left the church, including, our whole community and our business relationships to an extent. And anyway, as a business owner, I wonder how we can, I see it in a business sense, how can we directly compete with the products that religion is offering in terms of community, even advancements towards, it's crazy, but curing aging. How can we directly compete against the fears and the needs that people that embrace religion have? How can we compete on their playing field and win?
I don't know if competing is even the right way to look at it. I mean, I know that that's like the American capitalist view, is that like we're all in competition. That's what having a business is. But I do think that there's enough people, there's enough clientele, there's enough of a market. I have this viewpoint with my female friends who also work in television, that we are not all competing for the same jobs. There's enough work for all of us, and we need to be supporting each other. And so I think that it's kind of a ploy, and it's kind of a dirty ploy to use religion as a marketing tool, and you're better than that, and you don't have to do that. I do think that there will be a niche and a clientele that you will find, but if you're missing the pro-social component of it, there are really cool things that you can do on the nonprofit side, but also you can be a B Corp, which basically, it's a nothing title, but it's a way that you can show that the company that you have does like one-for-one models or donates money to important causes, that you have a pro-social viewpoint, and that it's really important to you that you make an impact. And I think you can do that in a secular way, and it's like a badass thing to do. So I don't know if that really fully answers your question. Do you guys have any kind of insights on that?
Amen.
Hopefully that answered your question, or at least gave you a little nugget. I don't know.
I don't know if this addresses your question or not, but it ties in with other things. We're winning. The nuns are on the rise. The secular community is growing. We're growing so much that, like, raise your hand if you're part of one of the local LA secular, free-thinking, atheist, whatever movement. Yeah.
Look at that.
You're not all part of the same group, I'm assuming. You know why? Because groups get into arguments and they split up into other groups, and people are like, "Oh no, the whole movement's falling apart, man. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do?" It's actually, for me, it's a good sign. It's a sign. It's a natural sign of growth that we're now big enough that it's not just a whole bunch of people who look like me sitting around, "Oh, religion sucks." Instead, we can have different groups that focus on different things. You can have a skeptic community that focuses on Bigfoot and UFOs, although I think they're missing some bigger opportunities, but you can have that group if you want. And you can have secular organizations that, my wife knitted 1,000 hats for the homeless last year, and we work with Humanists at Work and Atheists Helping the Homeless, 2 different groups that had a split. The splits may be good, and I know that this doesn't sound like it's an answer to your question, but it shows that we're growing, we can be more diverse, and that shows that we're winning. And so one of the answers to your question is time, and the other is to get people involved and active, because that reduces the amount of time that we need. As soon as there's more openly secular individuals out there where there's a normalcy Now, all of a sudden, even the business competition becomes, there's something to reach for. As soon as people start actually valuing secularism, as soon as people start valuing companies and organizations that are going to be pro-science, and they're going to call out anti-science, and they're going to put their money towards making sure that we don't elect anti-science individuals, or that we don't elect individuals who are going to give religious organizations even more privilege than they already have, then I think you'll see it kind of balances out, and then it hopefully fades a bit. But we thought that about flat Earth too, and that shit's back.
Well,
so.
and this is the last thing I'll say about this, but I also would be interested to actually look at the data and see how effective it is. I think it depends on the industry, but like, I don't think people are like going in and out because there's a Bible verse on the cup. Like, I think,
I don't go there because there's.
and
a
some
Bible
people
verse
don't
in
go.
there.
Like, it's the same thing with Chick-fil-A, right? Like, some people.
Yep.
Like, they would make so much more money if they were open on Sundays. What are they thinking?
I
No,
don't
we know
go
what
to-
they're thinking.
I would only go to Chick-fil-A to make out with a guy.
And you're done.
So we're from the South, and Chick-fil-A is really hard to give up when you're from the South. I understand voting with your dollar.
The frosted lemonade is a hard. It's hard.
I'll
to
tell
give
you
up.
that the WeHo Chick-fil-A is like all rainbow flags. It's kind of amazing. So at least eat at the WeHo Chick-fil-A. It's so good. Okay, never mind. I'm not advocating for that.
Question on this area? Thank you.
Hi. We actually came, my husband brought me to come see you, Matt, because he loves that you are so kind, that you are an atheist who is kind and understanding to people who don't think how you think. And he's not up here, so I just wanted to say that. He just really
Aw.
loves you. And
Well, he
much
should
love.
go on Twitter and tell all the people who hate me how kind I am.
I'm sure he will. But Cara, I actually had a question for you because I came to support him, but I found you and you're amazing.
Aw.
I'm the creator and host of the YouTube
I was
channel.
kind enough to bring Cara with me.
Yeah, thank you. No, I'm the creator and host of the YouTube channel How to ADHD. I work on disseminating science-based info to help break the stigma against mental health.
Hell yeah.
And I worry because I love that you said that you get duped sometimes by research and stuff that you read, because that happened to me just a couple of days ago. And I've been doing this for a couple of years. I'm not a scientist, but I've really tried to learn how to read the research and provide good information for people, kind of like a journalist might. And I still miss things, and I worry for the parents who are trying to make sense of this and have no idea how to read this. So we're working on an episode on media literacy. I was just wondering if there's a way to connect with you.
Of course. Yeah. Let's make sure you don't leave, because once we go, I think there's like a hi guys and hugs. Am I wrong? Is there a hi guys and hugs?
Have your people contact her people.
I will. I followed you on Twitter.
'Cause there you go.
I was actually just getting ready to send a message to the person backstage, because this is something that we didn't go over. Hey, Masha. I'm assuming that when we're done here, there's like the meet and greet, shake hands, sell stuff, talk to people outside.
We're going to kiss
Sweet.
babies.
So when we're done with Q&A, we'll
yeah,
all
so
be out
hang,
there.
please, and we'll
I'm gonna
connect.
go find a baby, and I'll be back.
That's cool. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. And congrats, too. I think that's awesome what you're doing. That's great.
Yes, sir.
Hello. Yes, I actually happen to be from Oklahoma.
Woohoo!
Formerly Southern Baptist. So thank you. Representation matters. I'm glad that you're there and proudly say you're from Oklahoma. But my question to all of you is, what do you think are the best avenues for reaching people on skepticism and reason? Like avenues, I guess, maybe like conversation, debates, shows. What do you think's most effective? And I guess also kind of goes with that, like, what type of attitudes have you found, and sort of attitudes, personality types have you found to be the most effective in also communicating?
I'm kind of experimenting. I would give lectures on skepticism, and because I've been doing magic since I was about 3, although seriously from the time I was 10 or so, I'd be trying to illustrate a point, and I'd think, holy crap, I know a magic trick that'd be perfect for this. And that's how I ended up doing this whole show. I did a smaller version for maybe groups of 15 to 30 people, where I would do close-up magic, which is what I've done most of my life. And then I just translate it into a stage. Now, how effective is it? I don't know, because it may be the case that only skeptics and fans of my stuff are showing up to the show, although I know that they've been bringing their friends. And one of the first questions somebody asked was, hey, I've got a friend who's not skeptical, but they're also religious. Is it safe to bring him to the show? And I was like, yes, apart from the opening bit, I really don't tread anywhere near religion specifically, but you might want to give them, like a paper bag to breathe into when we get to Q&A.
No, there's no way you're on stage with Jordan Peterson and you're not making an impact, though. You're not reaching people who are not your target audience. There's no way that you're not causing people to go, hey, wait, I never thought about it that way before. So I think it is effective.
Well, the best tool we have is the Socratic method, because instead of telling somebody they're wrong, you're asking them questions. You're asking them to demonstrate why they believe something. What is it about this that has convinced them? And in particular, what do they think should be convincing to other people as well? And so you're in a far less threatening position then. Anthony Magnabosco doing street epistemology type stuff, that applies to skepticism all the time. What Anthony's doing is not just about religion. It is one way to instill skepticism. And I think that the other aspects of this are to be open. Don't jump into conversations that you're not ready for, that you don't really want to participate in. There's no shame in, oh my gosh, they're saying something weird over there. I feel obligated as a skeptic to go over and show them why they're, no. But we need as many people out there openly questioning things as just be genuine.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. I was waiting for you to say that. It takes all types. Like, if you're asking for yourself personally, what's my best approach? Or if you're asking just because you're interested, what is the best approach? Am I looking at the right person right now? Yeah, okay, cool. I'm like making eye contact with you. I'm like, you're the guy who asked, right?
She's like scanning the room.
I know, I'm like, and this one guy's like, why are you staring at me? No. Also, like, being is so important because it takes all types and all of those people make an impact together. There are firebrand atheists who are incredibly effective, and there are people who would hate to be firebrand because they think it ostracizes people, and they're effective too. I mean, I would never want to talk down to somebody who I'm speaking to about science and skepticism and atheism. I would never want to put somebody on the defensive. And my view for a long time, since my views have evolved, has been that why would you tell somebody they're stupid in trying to change their minds about things? Yet, who's one of the most prominent atheists of our era? Richard Dawkins. And I'm not sure that he takes that tack, you know what I mean? So it really is, I think, important to do it your way, to be genuine to yourself, and honestly to try and figure out what it is that you're effective at. What are you good at? I don't debate. I'm not good at it.
I don't not debate.
Exactly. It's just, I would be so much less effective in a debate setup because I find myself speaking with too much nuance, and I'm caveating everything, and I'm freaked out, and I'm like, oh wait, did I misspeak? Oh, I need to look up that citation, and it's just, I'm not as quick on my feet in that way, and I don't like feeling trapped. It's just not enjoyable for me.
Debate's a very specific skill. I mean,
yeah, it's a specific skill.
Play to your strengths. Mm-hmm. People will, and there's a misconception, how do I go out and be an activist? Mm-hmm. It's a thing. There's a hard definition of, well, you need to be on stage, or you need to be Anthony Magnabosco, or you need to be a blogger, or you need to be a podcaster, YouTuber. Find out what you're amazing at, find out what your gifts are, what you're passionate about, and start there. And the second thing is, I agree with Dr. Ryan Cragen down at the University of Tampa, that one of the, if not the most effective way to change minds in this world is not to go out and hit people with data. Mm-hmm. Make friends with people.
Yeah.
A lot of the people, I'll go out and play tennis with people who will know me for weeks, and they won't know the specifics about what I do. That Seth guy's a nice fellow. We had a good match. Hey, I'll see you next week. They see me as a flesh and blood, three-dimensional human being just living his life. And you just living your loud and proud life, being happy, doing your thing, pursuing your passions. And then when it comes up organically in conversation, you're an atheist, and you have a chance to have that conversation, and they can't put you in their little box and reject you as a label. You are being an activist.
Yeah.
And you are changing the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We know, we have very firm evidence that tribalism, this divisive, really difficult struggle that we have as human beings all across the globe, is fed by a lack of representation. It's much easier to be a tribalistic thinker if you don't encounter people that represent what you think of as other. And early on, what ends up happening is that you'll surround yourself with like-minded people, and then you'll meet somebody who is other, and you'll go, oh, they're the exception to the rule. But eventually the scales start to tip when more and more people represent themselves, and they say, oh yeah, I'm an atheist, and I'm just your nice neighbor.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm an activist, but I'm also I do volunteer work, and I raise my family, and then they're like, well, gosh, he doesn't seem satanic at all, And then eventually they meet enough people that say they're an atheist that they're like, oh, they're not the exceptions to the rule. I guess atheists aren't evil.
I definitely agree with Cara that you shouldn't be condescending, which means talking down to people.
Thank you.
Did you take a photograph? Can you make me look like Hugh Jackman? Can you do some digital sort of a? By the way, if I don't have anybody shooting. If you guys shoot like photos of
Yeah,
whatever,
usually he just has a guy that follows him around.
No.
with a camera.
shoot that stuff and tag it, because I'd kind of like to see.
Oh
how all
yeah,
this
yeah, put it
looks
on social for sure. We're all on social, right? Yeah, we're all very loud on social media.
Yes, sir.
Oh, hi. My name is R.D. Tinkstrom, and you should remember that name from your Q&A with Allie Ward.
Ah!
And my question was about going into outer space, and you said you don't do anything without a helmet.
He asked a question on my AMA episode of my podcast. That's
Oh,
so
awesome.
cool. Yeah, I would
Are
never
you
go
going
into
to ask
outer
the
space.
same question here?
So
Because that would
scary.
be sweet.
That would be sweet. You want to ask that first?
Yeah.
No.
No, my question is, I'm an atheist. My entire family left the Catholic Church, but they're all still believers of Protestant Christianity, and they've all disowned me, so I'm like, I have no idea what to do to bring them back in.
We'll take you.
And,
Aw.
well, to actually have them invite me to things, But the other thing I had was, how can we be good social justice warriors if we don't want to accept people's religions like Islam or Judaism or anything like that? Because I don't believe any of them are true.
Yeah, I take a different tack on that than a lot of my atheist friends. I do accept that religion exists. I don't necessarily think the world would be better if we just wiped away all religion. I don't necessarily think everybody should be an atheist. I have no interest in evangelizing and converting people. I have a lot of friends, and I'm sure these guys are going to have slightly different, if not, really different, dramatically different opinions for me. Because I think that there are plenty of people who are religious without being fundamentalist. And I think that there are plenty of people who have managed to, there are very effective, very important scientists who have religious beliefs. And I don't think that they necessarily are in conflict. I think they can be. And I think the further you go on the fundamentalist kind of spectrum, the more dangerous things get. So I have a very different view of how we can be good social justice warriors if we're not going to accept religion, because I actually readily accept that that's a dimension of many people's lives. And I don't think that they are less than for it, and I don't think that they are even necessarily, wrong is a hard one, but necessarily in a worse place. I mean, I personally disagree with them the same way that I personally disagree with somebody who eats seafood. I think it's disgusting. I don't understand why they would ever do it. But it doesn't affect me necessarily.
I will pray for you.
Yeah. But the minute that it starts to encroach on my rights, that's when I start to get really upset. And I think
Then
that's...
how do we get religion out of our politics? Because they got to say, I love God in order to get elected.
I
It's a
think
big problem.
Didn't that start with us, though? I mean, doesn't it start at the grassroots?
Yeah.
Like, they started an atheist political party years ago, and it just died on the vine.
Of course.
Because they had put the cart well before the horse. The culture hadn't changed, and yet they decided they were going to go and have these atheist politicians or pro-science, rationalist politicians. I think we're back to changing minds one mind at a time. I have a question about your question. Are you asking how to get your family to accept you? Your Catholic or the God-believing family who has cast you off?
Yeah. How do I get them back?
Oh, gosh.
I don't, honestly, I think you've taken a burden upon yourself that should not be yours to carry. I understand the hurt that you feel. You know, with my own mother and father, we don't really speak, right? And I have to, and Natalie reminds me that they put you in this position. What it is it's someone saying, think like me, believe like me, validate me, or I will not accept you. Or I will be such a pain in the ass that you will wish that there was a hell, or you'll think there is a hell and you're in it. You are trying to live a life, an honest life on your terms. And when other people, these 8 or whatever other people, have left you, you did not leave them, they left you, and you're going to have to relieve yourself. I'm not saying it's not going to be painful, but it's not your fault that they left, and it's not your responsibility to bring them back or to bend or change so that they'll accept you. Acceptance shouldn't work like that. That's not a healthy definition of love.
Yeah.
And I think the narrative in my life that I've had only marginal success with most of my family is, you don't have to agree with me, you don't even have to like what I do. You just have to respect boundaries and respect the fact that my life is mine to live. And I would love to be able to agree to disagree on this subject if we can live around it and embrace all the other wonderful things that we have. I want that with all my heart. And I would communicate to them, if you're nervous verbally, do it in a letter, do it in an email, take your time, word it the way you want. Be generous, use the word I a lot. Don't say, you've done this to me, you think that. I feel this way, I'm on a journey, I'm like this, my life is good, I want you to know that. And give them the opportunity to meet you at that halfway point. But if they just won't go there, and if the emotional blackmail will not go away, you're going to have to be reminded that this is not on you, my friend. It's not on them. And I would wager that everybody in this room has your back, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What are you trying to make me cry?
And
Thanks.
I hate to hold up the line, but I do kind of want to continue on the point when you asked about how do we do social justice? Like how can we be socially responsible individuals? And I'll just speak to the fact that, like, psychology, which is a field that I'm diving into more and more, and I'm embracing.
Sure, play the expert card.
Part of it. I'm not an expert. I've got a long academic science-y career, right? Like, I worked as a scientist, but I'm just now really diving into psychology. And one of the things that's important in order to be licensed and to maintain your license once you get there is that you have to abide by the ethics code. And the ethics code for psychologists is very progressive. You cannot turn away a client because you disagree with them. And fundamental to being a psychologist is something called, for almost every orientation, unconditional positive regard. It means that even if you disagree with your client, even if your client has committed a heinous act, even if your client has a belief structure that's fundamentally different from yours, it is an imperative, actually, when you sit with them, that you offer them something called unconditional positive regard, and that you are as empathic to them as you would be to anybody else. And so I know that that's not something that we have to do in our day-to-day with all the people we interact with, but it's something that I strive to do. I mean, it's constantly a learning experience. And that's really where my kind of social justice view has been informed, is that I don't necessarily agree with religious people, but I respect them. And I don't think that just because they are living their lives in a religious way that they are somehow less than. That's really where it comes from.
You respect them as human beings, but it doesn't mean you respect the
Absolutely
ideas
not.
they hold.
Absolutely not. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
so
that's two very different things.
Yeah, so this is, when I joked earlier that my view was dramatically different. It's only dramatically different on one point, and that is when it comes to anything, it doesn't have to be a social justice issue, anything that we're working towards in that venue. I don't care what your other beliefs are. You're either on the same page with what we're doing or you're not. If I'm having a conversation with someone about, how do we work to eliminate the wage gap, or to make it, poverty, or to make it poverty?
No, that's not good.
To eliminate the problems related to poverty, it doesn't matter to me if they believe in Jesus, Yahweh, Allah, whatever. That doesn't matter. The part that I disagree with is that whether or not I think the world will be better off if everybody was an atheist. Now, if you wave a magic wand, and get rid of religion and make everybody atheist, I don't think you've made the world any better. You might have made it a little more correct, and you might have reduced some harm. But I want people to give up religion for good reasons, and I want to. It's going to be a process where people view their identity and their beliefs about morality through the lens of the religion that they are part of. You can't just take that away. And it's not even anything you have to worry about, because that's never going to happen. It's not like a whole bunch of people are going to go, well, yep, done with that God thing. Let me go rape and kill and murder and do, But the fear that people have, and this came up with Jordan Peterson and others, is that if there wasn't religion, people would just behave badly. We need that there for people. No, you replace it. You replace it with secular humanism. You give people the tools, and you expose what religions have done to poison the way we think about things. We need to have better conversations about death and dying, because religions have poisoned the world with this notion that there probably is an afterlife. And that's one way to ease someone's guilt and sorrow and loss at losing someone. But it's not necessarily the best way. If instead we taught people that death is an unavoidable conclusion of being alive, then that gets you to recognize that so far as we know, we have exactly one life to live. And it's in our best interest to make that the best life we can, and to respect and value people when they're here, and that because you don't know that you're going to get an afterlife to deal with it. That would make the world better, and it would ease a lot of grief. You're not going to fix everything, but if the goal is for me, the goal for skepticism is not to be right as much as it is to avoid being wrong. And so if you have an unfalsifiable claim, there can be, by definition, no justification to believe that it's true. It's unfalsifiable. It's an untenable position. There's no way to show you could be wrong, and therefore you cannot believe that it's true. And if religions are running around making unfalsifiable claims, then by definition, people used to say skepticism has nothing to say about religion because it's an untestable claim. Well, that's bullshit. Because what skepticism has to say about untestable claims is that by definition, you cannot have evidentiary warrant to believe them. Doesn't mean that your belief is wrong. It means that your reason for believing is wrong, because you can't have a good reason to believe an untestable claim. And so on that front, I am on a crusade, wow, that's a loaded word, to change the world, but I'm not trying to rob people of their religion. I'm trying to instill skepticism and humanism into them. I'm a skeptic, I'm a humanist, and I'm an atheist. And the third one is the least important of the three.
And that goes back to what you were asking about earlier. It really does. It takes all types who approach these things from all different places and approach them really differently, because that's how hearts and minds really do get changed, is because people are going to identify with different people along the way. And the more kind of vocal we become as a whole, the more people are going to be able to role model and see, okay, you look like me, you sound like me, I identify with you. Maybe this whole atheism thing isn't so bad.
Yeah,
When Matt's answering a question, does anybody else feel like they're watching the TV show? I can just get a flash.
Do you do this while you watch it?
I'm going to get to your question in 1 second. There's one thing I want to tack on here, and it's something I've said before, so apologies for those of you who heard everything I've ever said. Go for a fucking walk and listen
that's
to
weird.
somebody else.
Just saying.
But the saying from wartime, 3 on a match is bad luck. It comes from, the first guy in the trench lights his match, nothing happens. The second guy lights a cigarette, the second one lights a cigarette, the third one lights a cigarette, and he gets his head blown off. Because on the opposite side of the field, there's a sniper who, when the first one lights a cigarette, he goes, hey, what's that? And the second one lights it, oh, that's what that is. And by the time it gets to the third one, we are pattern recognition machines. And this idea, I've heard sermons about the significance of threes, which I actually did a video. There's a video on my Patreon up about 3 as a magic number. But in a non-magical sense, 3 is a significant number, because that's where you get to a pattern. The first time you hear something that is unusual or strange, the first time you meet an atheist as a believer, wow, that's weird. And the second time, that's weird, but I remember something about that. And the third time, oh, okay, now there's a pattern. We do this all the time. We do it when we're trying to remember names. We do it when we're engaging in various topics. So I could have a conversation with this person and make absolutely no progress for a myriad of reasons. Maybe they don't like bald people. Maybe I was a little too aggressive. Maybe I was a little too passive. But we have a conversation, and I've at least planted a seed, because Seth can come along and say the exact same thing the very next time that there's an opportunity for a conversation.
But in that smooth voice.
Yeah. Yeah, let's blow his head up a little more. But Seth can come along and say the same thing, and it'll have a slightly better impact. And then the third person comes along and says it, and now all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is a thing. And this is why we need more out and open atheists and secularists, is that it makes it more likely that people are going to get to that trend. So when I'm having a conversation on the TV show, I am not necessarily trying to change the mind of the person I'm speaking with. I am always trying to present the best case for that person, but I'm really talking to all the people who share that person's beliefs and their reasons, because they are safe in their house or wherever, mowing the lawn, whenever they're listening to it. That person is, we know from evidence, is more likely to double down, is less likely to acknowledge that a point has been countered, and they're more likely to stick with what they believe. But the person sitting at home is not in that position. They don't have that concern. They're safe because they can actually change their mind and engage on these things that the person under fire cannot. 3 on a match will light a fire across the world as long as there are individuals out there that are willing to plant more and more seeds, to borrow from our religious past. But yes, sir.
Perfect. Give me a chance for community commercial, and I'll take it. I'll say Camp Quest. Fun, friends, free thought. Right, we have 8 to 17-year-olds and adult volunteers too. If neither of those fit you, but you want to help, we can take cash. Our local camp is Wrightwood. It's the last week of July. On behalf of Camp Quest, I do want to thank each of you. Seth, you've literally hosted us in your home before. Cara, you came out and did the Dogma Debate fundraiser for us, and Matt, you're so involved with Texas and the Camp Quest community there. Thank you, thank you, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. With a pink beard out of that. I would still have the pink beard that I did for Camp Quest, except that it's kind of problematic for some promotional material.
And if you allow me a question, I'll ask you each, what's your favorite thing about Camp Quest?
Oh, interesting.
I like the fact that it has opened up the convention circuit to people who were locked out because they didn't have child care opportunities, and they felt like, well, this is sort of like, I can't enjoy these events, especially in Bible Belt areas in the South where they're desperate for free thought events. Camp Quest has allowed these people to come and be able to have their kids not just sort of housed, but in a stimulating environment where they get to engage and learn and walk away with stories of their own.
Absolutely. I mean, there's something very fundamentally, I think, progressive and feminist about it. Like, this is a real struggle for science conventions. It's a struggle for all sorts of conventions that, like, they can sometimes feel rejecting of women for that very reason, because they don't have the options available to them. And so to have that opportunity for, like you said, to be able to go, to be able to bring your kids along with you, and you're not just like feeding and watering them, but the kids are actually actively engaged and they're getting programming that's at their level, I think is huge. And they don't have to worry about sending them off to like some sort of religious daycare. You know what I mean? It's like they don't have to worry about their kids getting indoctrinated, which I think is so important.
Yeah, that's. I went to Camp Windermere in Missouri when I was a Southern Baptist. It wasn't, if anybody's seen Jesus Camp, it was close to that, but not quite. So I'm thrilled that Camp Quest is nothing like that.